Good afternoon, everyone, fellow commissioners, the public. Thank you. Any guests that are here, the applicants. I'm calling the meeting to order now. And I would first like to introduce our newest commissioner, William Pizell, to my left. Welcome, William. Hope you enjoyed this venture. Okay. And welcome back a couple of commissioners who are not here last month. Good God, most of the group. Carol, Linda, and Geraldine. Great, thank you. And before we actually do the roll call, would you like to mention the other commissioner? Well, the other two commissioners actually, maybe.
Right, so Commissioner Rodriguez mentioned that he will be absent.
Okay.
And Commissioner Barlow is attending through Zoom today. So yeah, we will have teleconference participation from Commissioner Barlow pursuant to the California Brown Act rules for just cause attendance. So I would now like to request that Commissioner Barlow respond to the following questions. Commissioner Barlow, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end up until now?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes.
Can you please give us a brief general description of the circumstances relating to your need to appear remotely?
I am feeling ill, so I don't want to make anybody contagious.
Is anyone 18 years of age or older there in the room with you?
No.
Can everyone clearly hear Commissioner Barlow?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
The Brown Act requires that any votes taken during the teleconference portion of this meeting be taken by roll call. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you too, Fernanda. Well, we've kind of done the roll call, but Spencer, would you like to do it formally, please?
Chair Column,
Here.
Vice Chair Rath,
Here.
Commissioner Barlow,
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Here.
Commissioner Pizell,
Here.
and Commissioner Smith-Crivello,
Here.
and Commissioner Rodriguez is absent.
Okay.
Staff present today is Planning Manager Hill, Principal Planner Raveri, and Recording Secretary Argenbright.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And perhaps we should also tell the public about how they can tune in to us,
Yes,
please.
thank you. Information on participating in this meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is on this meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. Remote commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak, and a timer will be shown on the screen. If you are connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. In the chamber, we recommend keeping phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with the meeting. Thank you for participating in your city government.
Great, thank you. I'm ready to open the consent agenda. Did everyone have a chance to look at June 13th's minutes? And are there comments, questions from anyone? Yes, Commissioner Geraldine.
Yes, I wasn't at the meeting, so the minutes were very important to me. And I had quite a few questions about the meeting. On page 7, item 2 up at the top, applicant O'Brien answered a commissioner question about water credits. I don't know what that means, what the question was or what the answer was. It's just a statement. There was a question, which of course makes me curious to know what the question was and what the answer was.
Sure. So it was a question regarding whether or not there were sufficient water credits available for the project.
And so when the house was purchased, it opens up the subject. Was there 1 or 2 bathrooms in the house?
It's my understanding there's one existing bathroom in the house based on the plans submitted.
Okay, there was 1 bathroom. So there's already been another bathroom added to the house, and they went through a permit process and there were water credits for the second bathroom.
I'll defer that one to the applicant. I can only speak for the plans that were submitted, which show the existing floor plan, lower level, one bathroom.
Okay, that's one question. And then Hill answered commissioner questions regarding proposed concessions from the applicant. Again, what was the question? What was the answer? And, it's just,
Yeah.
I want to be up to date and it just doesn't give me the information I need to follow.
Sure. I'm sure we'll get into most all of that again at this meeting, but I would also like to take this opportunity to remind both the public and the commission that these meetings are fully recorded and are viewable in full on YouTube. And staff can always provide links
Okay.
to those meetings if there's missing gaps in reading the minutes.
I think that's good, but not all of us are doing that. And I just came back to town. When concessions are mentioned, I think it's nice to talk about what the concessions are. And in that, and I did call and I did talk about these questions. I would appreciate minutes that have a little more detail in the future if possible, if things are mentioned.
Noted.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? Then
We-
perhaps.
We
could-
had a late
Oh, I'm
public,
sorry. Go right
Oh.
ahead, Fernanda.
we had a late public comment.
Oh, that's.
That was emailed to us at 3:10 PM today. And we've uploaded it to the submitted comments website, but I also printed it for you all and I gave you a copy from Commissioner, our previous Commissioner Dawson, Carol Dawson. So she states that let the minutes from the last meeting reflect that Commissioner Dawson stated that she was proud to have served on the Historic Preservation Commission and feels that the commission is in good hands. She hopes that the Mills Act is reinstated so that homeowners will be encouraged to maintain their historic homes, maybe by adding a condition that Mills Act properties be owner occupied. Also, she would like to see an ordinance to prohibit demolition by neglect.
Okay, very well stated. Yes, Geraldine?
Were there any other public comments?
Regarding the minutes, no.
No, just any other public comments
Anyone online
or any other public letters?
or here?
Not yet.
Okay, that's the only one that's come in then.
Mhm.
Thank
There
you.
were other public comments regarding the agendized item today, but there were no other public comments regarding the consent agenda. And there are no attendees with their hands raised.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
then perhaps we could move along to a motion to approve or disapprove the minutes.
Can the motion include accepting Carol Dawson's recommendation?
Certainly, certainly should.
So I make a motion that, can I make the motion if I wasn't here?
Mhm.
Okay. I make the motion to include Carol Dawson's
Comment.
attachment. She would like to have her attachment included in the minutes and I'm happy to approve them as not inaccurate, but I would also like to stipulate that encourage more detail in the future.
All right, any second on that?
I wasn't here, so. I don't
Well,
know.
I'll second.
I'll
it. Is that all right? Or Julie?
I'll second the motion.
That's great. Thank you, Julie. All right. So we can vote on these now. Can I just do a general all in favor?
No,
We have
roll
to do
call.
a roll
Oh,
call.
we have to do a roll call, sorry. All right.
Chair Column,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rath,
I abstain.
Commissioner Barlow,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Abstain.
Commissioner Pizel,
Wasn't here, abstain.
and Commissioner Smith Carvello.
I feel I can say aye.
Okay. All right. It's
Can we pause? Yeah. I don't
any
believe
opposition?
we had three.
Oh, go
We're
ahead.
waiting for
I'm not.
Julie.
We need a majority vote and that was a 3-3 vote, so it didn't pass.
It didn't. So I don't think I've been here in the 6 years when that's happened. So what is the next procedure?
So the minutes were not approved. That motion failed. Another motion can be made to approve the minutes. I'll remind the commission that you do not have to have been present to vote on the minutes.
Oh.
If you review the minutes.
That's
you
what I'm
can
thinking the
still vote on the minutes.
extensions are.
So it may be just a good idea with that knowledge to just, if someone cares to make a similar motion, and we can do another roll call.
I'll move to approve the minutes as written.
Okay.
And with the addition of
additions, yeah,
Carol's.
with the additions.
Right, great. And a second on that?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, William has seconded. And can we do the roll call again, please, Spencer?
Chair Column,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rath,
Aye.
Commissioner Barlow,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Aye.
Commissioner Pizell,
Aye.
and Commissioner Smith Carvello.
Aye.
Okay. Yeah, I had a feeling it was because they weren't here. Great. Okay, so we got that taken care of. I'd like to move on then our public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have anybody on hold or anything about that, Spencer?
There are no attendees with their hands raised.
Okay, all right. Then I think we should move on to the first public appearance item, 581 Scott Street. Everyone in favor for that?
Sorry, it's a public hearing item.
A public hearing, okay. What did I call it? Public appearance? Well, it is public appearance too, okay. All right, yes, the public hearing item considering 581 Scott Street. Do I read the whole paragraph, Fernanda?
You don't have to. Levi will
All right,
reflect the title.
all right, Levi,
Thank you, Chair.
you're quite welcome.
Yeah, so we're back. Feels like we never left. We're discussing the item before you is 581 Scott Street. It's a request for historic permit, use permit, recommendation to Planning Commission, and for the adoption of a historic preservation report. Recommendation from staff is that the HBC adopt a resolution denying the historic permit and use permit, recommending denial of the use permit, and denying adoption of the historic preservation report for the single-family dwelling addition at 581 Scott Street. This slide highlights the subject property and the geographical context, as you see here highlighted and with the orange arrow. It's bounded by 3 different street frontages with Larkin Street, Scott Street, and Van Buren Street. Existing residence fronts Scott Street and does carry a Scott Street address. Quick background on how we got here. The property was approved, or the project applicant submitted a Mills Act contract in July of 2023. Subsequently or concurrently, an application for residential addition was also submitted in July 2023, which was subsequently paused due to the conflicting design criteria for a property that is under a Mills Act contract versus a property that has not received a Mills Act contract. So the Mills Act process proceeded before design review commenced. The property was zoned H2 in November of 2023, as it is the Frank Hellum House and was found to be historically significant, as discussed previously. And then the property received the approval of the Mills Act contract at City Council in November of 2023 as well, based on California Register Criteria 1 and 2. The proposed project is a residential addition. It's processed, as I said, with a historic permit, given the property's recent historic designation and Mills Act contract. The proposed addition is 1,317 square feet as submitted, with 816 of that being on the ground level floor and 501 square feet proposed on the second floor. There's also an associated deck and balcony as a part of the project. The project was found to be consistent with the R3 standards. However, it was found to be inconsistent with some of the setback criteria for free structures. However, the applicant has submitted an application for a use permit in accordance with the Monterey City Code, which allows applicants to request incentives for historic properties for variation from development standards. However, it does have to be approved by use permit at the Planning Commission and has to receive a recommendation from this commission as well. And that application is a part of this request. And here we see the proposed project. As you see, it's the proposed addition is to the rear of the existing structure. It does include, as previously noted, both addition on the ground level as well as the second story, and then also includes a deck over where the one-story hyphen is proposed there in the middle, connecting the two, the existing structure and the proposed structure. I'll flip through some slides here that show both the existing elevations and the proposed elevations to get a feel for the impacts there. Here you see the existing elevation from Scott Street and then the proposed elevation with the addition noticed in the background. And this is as viewed from Van Buren Street. And then this is viewed from the other street frontage. However, I'll note that this is not, as many of you probably noted on the field trip, not highly visible from the other street frontage. And this, of course, is the rear elevation. And a recap for the for those that weren't in attendance, this project was considered by the HPC on June 13th. HPC received public comment as well as public written comment and deliberated amongst itself and ultimately continued the item with the following requests. Those requests were that story poles be installed at the project site, presenting the proposed project. Additionally, there was a request that an alternate project rendering showing a darker contrasting color for the addition be provided. And both of those were provided. And as many of you know, story poles were installed and a field trip was held on Monday, July 8th to view those story poles. And then the third request was to attempt to resolve conflicts between the applicant prepared historic preservation report and the Page and Turnbull peer review report. To note, no additional changes have been made in the project design since the last meeting. So no changes in either historic report have happened at this time. So we'll get into the Secretary of Interior standards. And so the historic preservation report was submitted with the application by architectural historian Meg Clovis. And it contains information supportive of the modifications to the Frank Helm House. That report was peer reviewed along with the plans submitted at that time and was peer reviewed by a consulting architectural resource group, Page and Turnbull. The peer review concurred with the historic preservation report provided by the applicant, with the exception of 2 Secretary of Interior standards that were found to be inconsistent. Those standards were standards 2 and 9. And for the purposes of this meeting, we will focus our attention on those 2 standards rather than the 8 that were found to be consistent. Secretary of Standard number 2, the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. I do want to note there's one typo on this slide. It's my understanding that the project actually will only alter 2 openings at this point due to a modification that was made post Page and Turnbull's report. As Page and Turnbull noted, there are openings that are to be modified that appear to date within the period of significance, which could be considered character defining features. They also noted that the project would alter the original roof line by replacing a shed dormer roof with a larger gabled dormer, and that the project would physically connect new construction with the historic fabric of the original residence. Sorry, we're not used to having someone attend virtually, so this is getting in the way a lot more than it usually does. Secretary of Interior Standard 9 was also found to be inconsistent in the peer review. And that states that new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. The Page and Turnbull report noted the proposed flat roof, blocky massing, and broad glazing are not entirely compatible with the character of the hip and gable roofs and more typical residential fenestration of the historic buildings on the property. When viewed from the northeast and east along Scott and Van Buren streets, the proposed addition would introduce a stark visual contrast in form and materials. Additionally, the hyphen, as proposed, may undermine the intent to provide a one-story separation between the 1.5-story historic house and the 2-story proposed addition, and that's due to the roof deck that's proposed on top of that hyphen. And they also noted the extent of glazing and the size of openings would be much greater at the proposed addition than the historic house. The extensive glazing at the proposed addition would be incompatible in design and materials with the character of the historic building. In conjunction with the peer review from Page and Turnbull, they offered a series of recommendations and noted that some or any combination of these recommendations could satisfy the HPC in determining the project consistent with the SOI standards. So we'll just run through those quickly. One of the recommendations is to retain the window openings on the east facade, restore the window opening on the west facade, noting that that would reduce the project's impact to original openings, which are identified as character defining. The other recommendation was to retain the existing south-facing dormer and omit the new second floor entrance from the project. This would reduce the project's impact to the original roofline and original openings, which are identified as character defining. I'll note that this change was made on the current set of plans that's been presented before you. Another recommendation was to omit the sunroom hyphen roof deck. This would create a truly one-story hyphen, which more effectively separates the massing of the original building from the addition. Another recommendation is if the retaining sunroom hyphen roof deck is maintained or remains, to use a transparent railing at its east edge. This would allow more of the historic building roofline to remain visible and reduce the visual impact of the proposed additions massing adjacent to the historic building. I'll note that this change was also made after the Page and Turnbull report and is represented in the plans that you have before you today. And moving on to the other recommendations was to set the proposed addition further back and allow the full length of the gabled roof to remain visible over the hyphen. And this recommendation notes that this would require relocation of the wash house and tack room, and notes that those two accessory structures are not identified as character defining within the site, and relocation of those would not require historic review. Another recommendation was to incorporate gabled, hipped, or shed roofs to the new addition rather than the flat roof, both at the hyphen and the 2-story portion, noting that this would soften the rectilinear massing of the new addition and increase compatibility with the historic buildings on the property. Separate recommendation was to reduce the size and number of proposed openings at the east facade. That's where you saw the glazing of the window wall. This would increase compatibility with the fenestration pattern of the historic building. And then it also noted to use wood or aluminum clad wood windows and glazed wood doors rather than the proposed aluminum weather shield view collection windows and doors at the proposed addition and new openings in the historic building, noting that this would increase compatibility with the character of the historic windows and doors. And finally, the final recommendation was to construct a 1-story detached accessory dwelling unit within the parcel instead of a rear addition to the historic building, noting that it would reduce the direct physical and visual impacts to the historic house, while the siding, massing, and appearance would still need to be evaluated for compatibility. There is a precedent for a second residential unit within the property's period of significance. So again, I'll note that based on those recommendations, the applicant did make 2 revisions to the plans. Again, those are represented in the plans that you have in your agenda packet. And again, those 2 changes was the elimination of the entrance onto the roof deck to maintain the south-facing dormer. And then also a change from metal railing on that deck to a transparent glass railing. And I'll also note, as I said before, the HBC may consider requiring a combination of any of the above Page and Turnbull suggestions that they feel would bring the project into consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and reduce impacts to the historic features and materials. Now we'll talk briefly about the use permit component. And again, this is relative to Monterey City Code Section 38-76H, which allows a process to modify underlying zoning requirements through a use permit for setbacks, parking standards, indoor floor area ratio standards if standards contribute to preservation of the historic setting or minimizes or eliminates impacts of alteration on a historic resource. This is, as I noted before, this is a use permit, so that would be approved at our Planning Commission. However, the HBC must make a recommendation to the Planning Commission in support or in not support of that request. And this slide just shows the findings that are required to approve such request. And that's that the proposed use is in accord with the objectives of this chapter and the purposes of the zone. Proposed use and conditions which they would be operated or maintained will be consistent with the general plan, will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare of persons residing or working in or adjacent to the neighborhood of such use, and will not be detrimental to properties or improvements in the vicinity or to the general welfare of the city. And then the third is that the proposed use will comply with any specific condition required for that use. And then these are specific to, and those were general use permit findings, and these two findings are actually specific to the granting of use permits for historic incentives. And those are that the impacts of the use, including traffic and parking, would not be detrimental to the surrounding area, and additional uses conform to an adopted historic preservation report and are necessary for the preservation of an historic resource or a historic interior. And the historic preservation report is one of the things that's before this commission tonight. And then we'll get into the requirements and findings for a historic preservation report that's also been submitted. The Monterey City Code requires adoption of a historic preservation report for any alterations to a H2 designated building, and that includes this one. The HBC has the authority to adopt historic preservation reports and issue historic permits for alteration. The historic permit shall be issued only upon finding that the proposed work is consistent with an adopted historic preservation report and the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. And this is just the general criteria for submitting and adopting a historic preservation report. And that's you must know which of the 4 Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties is being proposed for the resource, a written description of historic events connected with the resource, the historic context and interpretive period, an architectural history of the resource, and a program for preservation of the resource, including a statement of how the proposed program meets the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties. So that kind of brings us to this slide, which is kind of what is this commission's authority and what are you being tasked with tonight? So the HBC's been provided with 2 historic preservation reports. They have some differing conclusions on 2 out of the 10 Secretary of Interior standards. And consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards is at the center of pretty much all 3 decisions that the commission is required to make tonight. The HBC has the authority and discretion to take the information presented and end the record to determine the project's consistency with the SOI standards. And that if the project is found to be inconsistent with the SOI standards, the requisite findings for both the proposed use permit as well as historic preservation report and the historic permit cannot be made. Alternatively, if the HBC through their reading the materials that have been provided and taking in public comment, finds the project is consistent with the SOI standards, the requisite findings for the use permit, adoption of the historic preservation report, and the historic permit can be made. And the staff recommendation, once again, is denying the historic permit and use permit, recommending denial of the use permit for the 2-story addition and decks, and denying adoption of the historic preservation report for the single-family dwelling property at 581 Scott Street. And that concludes the staff presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, and the applicant is also present and they will be making a presentation as well.
Thank you, Levi.
course.
Very thorough. All right. Are there questions? Yes,
Excuse me.
Carol.
How high are the ceilings in the proposed addition?
Are you referring to the interior ceilings or the
Yeah.
roof line?
Yeah,
I'll have to
sure.
defer that to the applicant.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Geraldine?
I have a question back. You were speaking fairly rapidly and I didn't understand completely the conflict that moved the Mills Act portion ahead of the addition. I'd like more clarification about that.
Sure. So through the Mills Act process, there's a historical evaluation of the property and the alterations that have been made to the property over time and whether or not enough character defining features have been maintained that would still make it applicable for historic significance. And part of that is alterations and additions that have been made to the property and whether or not they're consistent with the historic fabric of the property. So that's an important thing to know if the property has historic significance before going down that path, because the required review is very different for a historic property versus a property that has not been identified as historically significant. So for instance, if they did not go through the Mills Act process, this addition would not be before this commission, rather it would be before the Architectural Review Committee because it would not be historically significant. Alternatively, if they went through the addition process first and went to the Architectural Review Committee and then had an addition approved and constructed, that could impact the property's ability to be found historically significant based on the alterations that have been made and could possibly no longer qualify for a Mills Act contract.
Yes, yes,
Kind of a
Carol.
follow-up question on that. So if a property has a Mills Act contract and they want to add on, generally they have to attach the add-on to the building. How do you do that without destroying historic fabric?
Sure, it is possible. I mean, there's standards and bulletins from the Secretary of Interior that talk about that, and that's essentially what's before you today is whether or not the applicant was successful in doing that. It's not additions aren't prohibited to to be added on to historically designated properties. It's about the whether or not they do so and consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards and how it relates to that existing structure. I think if you looked at the Page and Turnbull report, it provides a number of recommendations on how this type of thing can be done and still not have a negative impact on the historic structure. Alternatively, the applicant has also provided a historic report that states that that has been done. So it's to the discretion of this commission whether or not you feel they were successful in designing the addition consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards.
Do you have any slides that show where the hyphen goes into the house?
Absolutely. The hyphen portion is right here. This is the glass railing,
Right.
and then this is the roof line.
So looking at what the rear of the house is, that's the south side, I think.
That's correct.
Okay. So looking at what's there now, what are they taking off to put the hyphen on?
Yes, so I believe it's a exit door into the backyard right now that would become an entryway into the sunroom hyphen.
So that's the major change, is that door on the back?
Correct, and I imagine there's probably some of the siding, the openings
Okay.
probably going to be enlarged because it'll be an interior.
Okay.
But I'll defer to the applicant on the interior specifics of it. But yes, that's going to be attaching right here.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other comments here?
I have a question, Kathy, for Levi.
Yeah, Julie.
Yeah, Levi, can you clarify a bit? I think you had mentioned that we had two preservation reports. It was my understanding then kind of that we had the applicant prepared report and then a peer review. Are you considering the peer review a separate report or an analysis of the applicant prepared study?
Great question. It actually was a separate report, but also evaluated the report provided by the applicant. So it was that they were actually brought on to do both.
Okay. And then can you just clarify, we spoke a little bit about this on the site visit, but the plans that were evaluated in the studies, I think they're different than what plans we're evaluating today. And just if you can speak to that and any kind of ramifications if we intend on approving this.
Sure. So yes, and I believe you're referring to the square footage amount that was noted in the applicant provided historic preservation report that I believe noted that the addition was 1,088 square feet. However, the plans that have been submitted to our department proposes an addition that's actually 1,317 square feet. I believe there's a question at the field trip as to which plans and of which size of an addition was reviewed by the applicant prepared historic report. And I hesitate to speak for the applicant or the architectural historian, but it's my understanding that the project square footage was in fact different at that time. So I won't speak for them. They can provide additional information on whether or not their historian has reviewed the present plans for the addition of 1,317 square feet.
Oh, yes, Geraldine.
I think for me, this is a little bit unusual because usually when we look at a Mills Act application, we're seeing the property the way it intends to be. Most of the properties have continued to be similar, very similar, or exactly the same. And, any construction or change was done before the Mills Act. And so we were able to kind of take that into consideration. And so we also have to ask ourselves and see if I'm correct about this, that this opens it up, if we were to accept this, does that open it up to other Mills Act properties that they can add additions similar to this then to their properties?
So I think especially when dealing with historically significant properties and additions or alterations, it's extremely case by case. So I don't think this is by any means a precedent setting moment. Each project and application is reviewed under its own merit. So for that part, I don't think it opens the door for anything. I think to your comment or question about this being out of the ordinary for additions to come in, it's not that uncommon for applicants to request additions or alterations to make historic properties maybe a little bit more usable for them. Again, it's not prohibited. It just requires that they be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. I'll note that the purpose for dividing the two things is that a property that's found to be historically significant is based on the structure that's there today, not any proposed changes. So it's historically significant based on the criteria laid out by the Secretary of Interior standards or the Secretary of Interior. The criteria that's laid out, it's either historic or it's not, regardless of any proposed changes. Once determined to be historically significant, now dictates what those proposed changes can be and how they look, if that makes sense.
Well, not exactly, but I'm trying to work with you because we have different backgrounds in terms of understanding that language. So I'm more of a historian and, you may have a different background, but so I'm trying to, usually we know the scope of the project and it's been in place, and then we add Mills Act. This is very different to me, 9 years on this commission, after 9 years, that we all agree on Mills Act, and then this rather large change comes in that does affect the appearance of the smaller looking house. I know the square footage isn't smaller, but the way it looks is smaller now with this looming addition that comes over the top of it when you look at it straight on. And so it just feels like a very different order to the project. And I have to ask myself, if the addition were to have been placed there, would I think of it as a Mills Act worthy project? You know, it's in my mind because it's so unusual. In the last 9 years, I haven't had a situation come to us that's exactly like this. So it's striking me as unusual. And it could be that legally it is doable, but it isn't customary for us. This is an unusual pattern for us. So I'm just trying to work with that if in my own mind. So that's why I'm asking these questions about
That's fair.
procedural questions. I see it's doable legally, but I understand you know, what you said in terms of the procedure to know if it's historic or not. But for me, I don't know personally if I would have seen this as a Mills Act project if I had seen the whole scope. The other question I have, and in terms of property tax and Mills Act, does the property tax support occur only for the front house and not the addition? Or does it include the entire property tax that will include the addition? I'm curious about that too.
So property taxes are applied to property as a whole.
Okay, that's interesting to know.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have a comment or question? Or maybe we should open it up to the floor. What do you
Well,
think?
we have an applicant
Yeah.
presentation as well.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
kind of what I meant about opening up to the floor. Sorry, applicants. So if you would like to proceed, we'd love to hear from you.
Good evening.
Good
Just to start,
I'll get you queued up. Okay.
okay.
Make sure it's gonna work. It'll go back. I think it's, should be good now.
good evening.
evening.
My name is Liam O'Brien, one of the owners of the Helm House, along with my wife Julie, who is here this evening, and sister and brother-in-law Helena and Dave McLaughlin. Dave who was here tonight, and Helena could unfortunately not make it. I want to start out with saying just there seems to be a lot of contention about the Mills Act portion of this project. And I will go through the timelines of how we came about to this day. We had met with the planning department and tried to structure this whole property. And it wasn't a matter whether we were going in to do the Mills Act or the addition first. If we had known that this addition was going to cause this much contention, we probably wouldn't have gone for the Mills Act. So I just want to kind of make that clear. This was all went in tandem. Most of you have heard this presentation already for the ones, so I'm going to repeat it for the ones that weren't here last month. So in our presentation, I'd like to review the following items, starting with our overview, followed by where we started, what we have done, what we are working on, and where we are going. Yeah. The Frank Helm House meets California Registered Criterion 2 person as the home of prominent businessman Frank Helm, who made significant contributions to the community and economy of the city of Monterey. By adhering to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, we aim to preserve the integrity of the Frank Helm House, ensuring it continues to reflect Helm's contribution to Monterey. As stewards of the Helm House, it is our intent to preserve not only its architectural integrity, but also the historical legacy of its owner, ensuring that future generations can appreciate the profound impact of Frank Helm on the history of Monterey, California. I'd like to review the communication timelines with planners and building department from day one. We closed on the purchase of the property on January 4th, 2023. Prior to closing, we engaged with Meg Clovis, a well-respected historian in Monterey County for the last 35 plus years, based on a recommendation from Kimberly Cole in community development. Meg in turn recommended our architect, John Skorks, who I'd like to point out is currently the chair of Monterey County Historic Resources Review Board and has been for the last 20 plus years, both in attendance this evening. Prior to commencement of any work, all parties met with planning staff on February 15, 2023 to discuss a collaborative approach to the project. Our intention was to create a partnership with the city in order to navigate the complex task ahead of us and to fully understand and comply with all city rules and regulations pertaining specifically to our property. We had a follow-up meeting on June 9th, 2023. On August 7th, we had an on-site meeting to review the location and intentions for a two-story addition. At this meeting, we showed planning the two-story addition and it was agreed we could move forward with this design. We met again to review on August 18th, 2023. After those meetings, we submitted informal plans on September 6th, 2023. With some back and forth with planning and building departments on building separations related to the non-historic tack room and wash house and moving the proposed addition 3 foot forwards towards Van Buren, we submitted our formal package on December 10th, 2023. It wasn't until January 31st, 2024, that planning notified us that they may not support the project, which we were blown away by given all our efforts up to that point. They requested a third-party review, which took the best part of 3 months to obtain. After we received the report, we scheduled a follow-up meeting in person on May 8th, 2024 to discuss the third-party report. Prior to that meeting on April 17th, we submitted revised plans with our concessions to address items in the report that we agreed with. Although the correct plans, I'm not going to go into that because I think Levi has already spoken to the concessions that we've made in his current presentation. Moving on to building permits. After multiple meetings with building department, we were able to obtain a permit to remodel the home on April 17, 2023, and our deck permit on September 15th. We worked continuously. I'll make sure I have my dates correct, sorry. We worked continuously with the building department during the course of construction as we came across multiple unforeseen issues. We are so grateful for the help and guidance from our building official for how this process was handled with such urgency and efficiency, yet following stringent guidelines. Mills Act. Towards the end of 2023, we continued to focus on the Mills Act application and attended multiple hearings, which was ultimately approved on December 15th. During those hearings, we were so pleased with feedback from the Historic Board and City Council on the status of our efforts. We continue to have neighbors stop and speak to us as they pass by our home and compliment us on the transformation of the house and property. Next is the initial glimpse. We have some photos here on the condition of the house and property from the day of purchase. As you can see, it was overgrown, and some would say the house was in a state of disrepair. Chimney was falling apart, windows rotting out, water flowed through the roof into the house, raccoons nested in the attic space, mold was evident. I could go on. These are not complaints. Since Dave and I own a custom home construction business, we accepted the challenge to bring the structure back to life to the best of our ability. I believe Frank Helen will be pleased and proud of our efforts. And there's just a couple of more photos. Now on to concessions made in response to Page and Turbo. Again, I believe Levi has addressed all those concessions, which I will skip over. The report refers to it building a two-story structure with a flat roof. I'd like to point out surrounding properties with flat roofs. As you can see, there's 7 within a stone's throw from our property. If you can see the image. Progress. The following photos show the before and after photos to date. You'll notice Van Buren Street is barely visible. We also replanted the bougainvillea that once draped over the wall. As you can see, we've made some major progress. And there's some befores and afters to date. Work completed. Property repaired and replaced fencing on all sides, cleared overgrown vegetation and debris, hired arborists to revive trees, planted perimeter screening. Exterior, repaired and replaced damaged roof, repaired all windows, repaired chimney, refinished siding. Interior, stripped mold covered walls and replastered, refinished wood, walls, floors, leveled floors, installed plumbing, wiring, heating, and restored the kitchen. What we are working on. We're currently in the process of remodeling the non-historic tack room and wash house. Although these are non-historic structures, we felt it was incredibly important to save these structures to honor the property. After consulting with planning and building, both agreed if our proposed addition was approved, the separation issue could be resolved. Hence why we applied for a building permit to remodel these structures now. Now in the staff report, they rejected our application for a setback incentive. This is another complete surprise given the more recent level of communication between all parties regarding the issue. If the addition was to be approved today, we feel we'd be forced into demolishing these structures. The only alternative would be to remove these structures, expand southwards for a one-story addition, being the only direction we could go to meet a Secretary of Interior standards, which would mean a much larger footprint. Although these structures are not considered significant in the historic sense, we feel it will be a huge loss to the history and character of the property. It states in Preservation 14, there is no formula or prescription for designing a compatible new addition. A new addition is a historic building that meets the standards. Can be any architectural style, traditionalist, contemporary, or a simplified version of the historic building. However, there must be a balance between differentiation and compatibility in order to maintain the historic character and the very identity of the building being enlarged. The following references a paragraph from the Page and Turnbull report. And I don't know if this is going to be applicable right now. I'm going to go through it anyway. Although they concluded criteria 2 and 9 do not comply with the Secretary of Interior standards, it states in the report, as depicted in the project drawings reviewed by Page and Turnbull, the entire two-story portion of the rear addition would extend to the east of the east wall plane of the historic house. While it may be preferable overall to minimize the visibility of a rear addition from public rights of way by aligning or setting it back from the planes of a historic building, in the case of the subject property, the proposed addition is set sufficiently to the rear that its proposed massing would not have a detrimental visual impact. Further, as the historic building is set within a largely undeveloped lot that is visible not only from Scott Street, but also Van Buren Street to the east, altering the alignment of the east facade of the proposed addition would have little impact on its visibility from public rights of way. With that said, we're more than willing to make the concessions submitted to planning regardless of this description. The next slide shows an aerial view of the approximate footprint of the proposed addition. Note the location of the tack house and washroom. We engaged with a landscape architect who walked the property with us along with a certified arborist prior to plant removal and tree trimming. He also provided a preliminary future landscape plan. All perimeter plants and screening have been installed. Rehabilitation is defined as the process of returning a property to a state of utility through repair or alteration, which makes possible an efficient contemporary use while preserving those portions and features of the property which are significant to its historic, architectural, and cultural values. The next 3D image shows a different angle to the proposed addition. I'd like to note this view does not show the wall, which would block the view from Scott Street. We have made an additional change to this image. We've put a darkened, we put a wood siding on with a dark finish, so this doesn't reflect it. And I believe all the staff that were on the commission that were out at the house would have seen the sample. And finally, we plan on revitalizing the tobacco warehouse and garage structure that was built from the horse barn related to the tack room. I hope you take all our efforts into consideration when making your decision. I'd like to thank you for your time this evening from the O'Brien and McLaughlin family. We look forward to continuing working on our vision for the Helm House and property. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Liam. I believe we did commend you for everything you've done to improve the property. I think all of us did that last month, and your efforts are appreciated.
Thank you.
You wanted to say something,
Yeah.
Linda?
Could you go back to your concessions that you skipped over and show us what those were? Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Oh, back away. I'll go back away. I'll start at the beginning. So we moved the building 3 feet forward towards Van Buren, which was not necessarily a concession by Page and Turnbull, or what we're in the Page and Turnbull report, but it was a recommendation from planning.
Okay.
We eliminated the dormer access, removing the dormer for access to the deck, so we can leave it intact. And we put in a tempered glass rail instead of a metal rail between the hyphen between the two structures.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Carol, O'Neill?
It appears that the deck on the second floor overhangs the hyphen on the first floor. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And how high are the ceilings interior?
8 feet.
8 feet. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
I have another
Oh,
question.
all right, Linda.
In the Page and Turnbull report, they make a comment that some recent removal of rear additions to the property. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. So there was a 1970s addition that was put onto the rear of the kitchen that included a bathroom, shower, like a kind of an ADA type structure. That was in pretty much disrepair. There would have been photos up there, and we went to building planning and we were allowed to remove that structure.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yes, Geraldine?
In the structure, there was a shower and a bathroom.
Correct.
And so the water credits from that structure moved to the house where there's now another bathroom.
Correct.
So at the time you purchased it, there were 2 bathrooms.
Yes.
Okay, I was trying to determine that. I thought you said 1, but there There were
I-
two approved.
I noted
bathrooms.
based on what's on the plans, and at that point, the structure had already been removed. So the plans that show the existing house show one bathroom.
But when he bought it, there were two bathrooms.
Correct.
That's what I'm trying to determine.
Yes.
Because I was trying to figure out how that other bathroom appeared. So now that makes,
And we've also checked with the water district and confirmed the amount of credits that we have, and we do have enough credits.
are they because of the size of the lot that you have? no
I'll
credit?
actually have to let the architect speak to that.
Oh, good. That's confusing. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay.
One more question.
Okay, go right ahead.
When we walked the project on Monday, I was trying to visualize the size based on the, the boards and also the ground painting and the entrance, the steps and the entrance to get up to the elevation of the initial lower floor bedroom weren't marked out. Were they included in the square footage?
That's an exterior deck, and I'll have to let the architect speak to that too.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we should have the architect answer a couple
I
of
think
these.
we want to hand it over to maybe Meg
Oh,
Clovis first.
all right, that's fine. Yes, Meg, certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you too, Liam.
Good evening. I'm going to address specifically standards 2 and standards 9, since that's what the Page and Turnbull report did not agree with. First off, you've heard the definition of rehabilitation, but I also want to emphasize in the introduction in the standards, it says, the standards are to be applied to a specific rehabilitation project in a reasonable manner, taking into consideration economic and technical feasibility. So I want to just emphasize that reasonable manner and technical feasibility, because that plays into both standards 2 and 9. So standard 2 states the historic character of the property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. So Page and Turnbull had 3 areas that they were concerned about. First off, it was the door on the south part of the west facade. However, that was not installed during the period of significance. It was installed in the 1970s, and it's outside the period of significance. So that concern is a non-issue. It's off the table. The second is the dormer on the south slope of the hipped roof, and that was one of the concessions. There will be no changes to that dormer, so that's a non-issue. The last one is the window on the south part of the east facade. This will become an interior door, so yes, that window will change. However, this change is consistent with the standards that says that any openings, if they are to be changed, they should be on secondary elevations. This window is on a secondary elevation. I also would like to say that we're not changing 10 windows, we're changing 1 window. It's a reasonable application of the standards. You mentioned, I believe it was Commissioner Rath mentioned the rear additions, and Page and Turnbull had mentioned that as well. Again, those additions, they have been removed, but they weren't within the period of significance. They did mention the connector, the hyphen connector, and the standards and guidelines say specifically that that type of hyphen should be used between a historic house and an addition because it does save historic fabric. So everything about standard 2 meets the standards. Standard 9. The first part of standard 9 states, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. And we just went through that. There's 1 window that will be changed. Then the new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and environment. So in Page and Turnbull's report, they agreed that the addition is visually subordinate, has simple massing, is differentiated, and uses compatible siding. They did not like the metal railing on the hyphen deck, which you've already heard about. The metal railing has been removed and replaced with a glass railing, which was their recommendation. So again, that railing is a non-issue. And as Liam had mentioned again, that Page and Turnbull states that the addition is set sufficiently to the rear and that its proposed massing would not have a detrimental effect. This is the preferred placement of an addition is to the rear. As you probably know from reading Preservation Bulletin 14, it says that the preferred location is the rear. It's not the side, it's the rear. So the Page and Turnbull still disagreed with the roof line and the glazing, which you've heard about. However, I will say that in Bulletin 14, it clearly states, and this is a quote, that generally glass may be the most appropriate for small scale additions. They're speaking specifically about the hyphen, which is a small scale addition, such as a connector between an addition and a historic building. If you look at the plans, glazing is used in that connector, so it meets the standards. So we still have the issue with the roof line and the glazing. That ties in with technical feasibility, which John Skorkas will discuss. But it is my contention that there's no, that the whole project does meet standard 2 as I've described, and it does meet standard 9 as well. So I can take any questions.
All right, anyone have a question of what Meg just told us? Oh, I guess we're all good on that, Meg. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to hand this over to John Skorkas now, the architect on the project.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. John Skorkas, architect. Excuse me. I'd like to kind of answer a couple of your questions first. One with the water credits. When you get the property, water management does an inspection with the sale. And so you get a list with all the credits that they have on site. So you get this list and there was water fixtures in the tobacco warehouse. There was water fixtures in the wash house and the house itself. So you give, you calculate all these fixtures, they give you the numbers, you review what you have and everything we have will comply with water fixture credits that we have. So we verified that part of it. And then I'd like to just mention about the Mills Act too. I'm on the Historic Resources Review Board and we get the applications both ways as well. And what happens is, the Mills Act is only for the historic property. So if you do the addition, the cost and the construction cost of the addition does not affect the Mills Act. Any repairs, maintenance, tax credits go for the historic property, not the addition. And so in this case, if you do the Mills Act first, the addition just has to meet the Secretary of Interior standards. And that's how we work with that and vice versa. So, you could do the addition first, and if you want the Mills Act applies just to the historic portion. And that's how we look at that. And then once again, ceiling heights were a question. The original house has 10'2" ceiling heights. Our addition has 8-foot ceiling heights, which are pretty much standard minimum ceiling heights for structure. The other thing is the reports, the question about the square footage on the reports. The plans that were reviewed by both Meg Clovis and Page and Turnbull are the same plans that you have before you, and they were the same plans that we've always had. The square footage comes into just a miscalculation on the square footage for the lower level. The upper level is the same. It was just a calculation. There was no change in footprint or floor area. So just to make that clear that it's the same all through the process. There's nothing that changed that wasn't reviewed. It was just the technicality of the calculation of the floor area itself. So then with the building, you know, when you look at the Secretary of Interior standards, and like Meg said, it should be on a secondary elevation, the rear is preferred. So what happens is with Meg, you know, the client, we figured out the footprint we're allowed to build in. And as you know, Meg said, we were pushed further east because of the tree that the planning was concerned about. We were concerned about to provide privacy for the neighbor. You know, we wanted to keep the tack room and the wash house because we thought those were important. And then we have the main house, and then the rest. The further you go east, the more you get into the view. And the whole principle is to kind of minimize the view, not to totally eliminate it, but to minimize it. And so, and then, you know, you have that box, and then you have a height limit. And the height limit is two things. One, you've got a height limit for zoning, and then you want to stay below the ridge of the existing house. So you're not competing with the ridge and you're not imposing on the ridge. So we managed to do all that. And I think we accomplished a pretty good job within that footprint. We did use the connector, the glass connectors. And I think we, you know, and so what happens with that is none of the two-story portion ever touches the main house. And the connector, the hyphens, always stays below the ridge of the existing house. So we haven't altered pretty much anything of the existing house. The roof line stays the same. And so there's, when you look at it from the street, when you look at it from the side, the whole view of the existing house remains intact. And then part of the Secretary of Interior standards, as well as if you move the addition, that the existing still remains and that's identifiable. And with the hyphens, we created that. So we kind of have three hyphens in a way. We have the one in front, we have a small one in the back that separates that portion in the back from the side entry. And then we've got the stairway, and that's kind of where you see most of the glasses in the stairway. So that kind of, in a sense, becomes a vertical hyphen. When you talk about roof lines, you know, when you work with two floors, which we were pretty much directed by just the program and the space we had, you know, there's a lot of comments that, oh, you should have a slope roof, you should have a hip roof, you should do this, you should do that. Two things come into play. One, the architecture of the house is not historic. So it's like, what are you working with when you design? You know, there's nothing, everything's different on the house. The ages are different, materials are different, and the roof lines are different. We have like, I think 7 different roof lines on that property. So if you try and work with a pitched roof, you're complicating the situation, and you're not relative to anything. So that's one of the, you know, the criteria you're dealing with. And then we've got the height limit. So you put a roof line on there, or a pitched roof, and you can't fit it within the height limit. And then the additional thing is a sloped roof actually creates more mass than the flat roof does. Because if we added a slope roof under the 2-story portion, you're adding, you know, if you do the 12 and 12 like the main house, you know, you're probably adding another, you know, 8 feet on top of that, or 5 feet on top of the roof. So you're actually increasing the mass by trying to do a sloped roof. So it kind of goes back to the technical feasibility, and the easiest thing, the simplest thing to do was to do the flat roof. And it does separate, it visually separates it. It's a clean form. It doesn't compete. And it's a backdrop to the existing house. So when you stand on the sidewalk and you look back, you automatically can see the original house in its entirety. And then the addition becomes the backdrop. You know, we've added siding, different scale. We have the glass. You know, one of the comments was to have a vertical relation to the glass, or vertical element, visually vertical elements to the glass. And I think we've accomplished that. What happens with the stairway is glass is also a method of transparency. So if you took that form and you wrapped it in wood, it would be this huge solid mass. When you add the glass, it becomes transparent, it becomes light, and it kind of disappears. So I think there's some misnomer in the massing. And when you look at the plans and you see it as a box, you're not going to see that standing at grade level. You're going to see a certain portion, you're going to see this corner, you're going to see the stairway, and the back disappears. So it's all the perspective of, you know, how you're looking at it and what portions come into play. And then when you look at the definition of rehabilitation, I think we've totally accomplished the definition of rehabilitation with our project. One other thing, the roof deck, you know, there's this conversation about, you know, the roof deck to the hyphen, whether it's a roof deck or a roof, it's the same thing. The only thing with the roof deck is you could walk on it. I mean, we're not changing, it's not changing a dimension, it's not changing a height, it's not changing anything, it's staying where it is. It's as minimal as we can make it. And it was just an opportunity that you have it, and why not use it? I mean, so anyway, I think we've accomplished a pretty good design. You know, I wouldn't design anything that I don't think I would approve on our board or that our board would approve. And you know, I've had a lot of training, and I think we've got a really good design that meets the standard. So, any questions?
Right. Any further questions from Mr. John? Yes.
I know you talked about the roof, the deck over the hyphen as being kind of a non-issue, but if you didn't have that deck there, it would lower that. And it would be the one-story hyphen that the standards talk about, and not the one-story plus people standing on it. You know what I mean? So if you eliminated that deck, would the applicant
Well, the people are
consider that?
transitory, but I mean, the people don't affect the architecture, right? I mean, it's transitory.
But the glass or the railing does add to the height.
It's well, you're not going to see it. I mean,
I'm-
you know,
I'm not
I mean,
gonna
it's
argue with
just
you.
there's no structure to the glass. It's just glass.
Okay,
It's all structured from the bottom.
all right, I'm not gonna argue about that. The fenestrations on the addition, it seems like there's a lot of fenestrations, and that's something that Page and Turnbull talk about, is that it's not consistent with the house. Is there any
But
consideration?
what part of the house do you want to be consistent with, I guess? There's so many additions to the house and so many different features to the house that are different periods that this actually complements. You know, they mentioned the vertical element in Meg's report. It mentions trying to keep a vertical visual element to it. And I think we've accomplished that. And the idea of the glass is the structure feasibility as well, but it lightens and makes the house transparent. It cuts down the mass. And it's a contemporary structure. You could pick different designs that you think are relative to the addition, and giving the complexity of everything. And one other additional thing is there's 5 structures on the site. And they're keeping all those original. They're not changing any of the 5 structures. You know, there's the tobacco barn, the garage, the, you know, main house, and the wash house and the tack room. And so that's like the site. And you have the main house. And this is kind of in this box where it's pretty much kind of in the center of the site. So what this does is it reflects the new addition, complements the site. So when people walk on the site, they're not confused by more hip roofs and this and that. It identifies itself as what it is. And then the 5 buildings on the site become what they are. They become the site. So anybody that walks on the site identifies what's historic and what's not. And we've actually complemented what's there. We're not distracting from it. We're not imposing on it. We're complementing what's there.
So there's no consideration in reducing the fenestrations.
I think the fenestration works for what we want and accomplishes the
Great.
Secretary of Interior standards.
All right. Any other comment? Otherwise, I would like to open comments to the public. I know we have some guests here. Geraldine, did you have something else to say before I open to public comments? You're okay. All right. Yes, I know we do have some guests, and you may speak now, and you would introduce yourself, and it's usually a 3-minute limit as to what you can tell us.
Good evening, Richard Hellam, Frank
Hello.
Hellam Sr.
Welcome.
Thank you. Frank Hellam Sr. was my great-grandfather. He and Amelia Hellam, his wife, purchased that property in January of 1900. There were 7 generations of my family that have been nurtured by that home. They range from my great-great-grandfather, John Hellam, down to my own grandson, Philip Hellam, 8 years old.
Mm.
We have all enjoyed that property. The property became mine after quite a trial. And my great uncle Lee had died in 2009. He was the last one who lived there, and settling the estate was quite a feat. But I got it done. Unfortunately, my uncle had left the house, and Liam commented on this, in deplorable state. I could not rent it in good conscience. I tried to hold on to it, but fortune just was not with me. And finally, in January of 2023, I did sell it to the O'Briens and the McLaughlins. I had been very particular about who I was considering selling to. I had 2 contractors that I've known for 30 years that wanted to buy it, but they wanted to develop it. They wanted to do much more, and I wasn't willing to do that. I considered the neighbors, many of whom I still have relationships with today. And when the O'Briens and McLaughlins entered the picture, I felt that they were a good fit for it. We sold to them. They gave me every consideration and time to get my my family heirlooms out, which I greatly appreciate. And back to the house itself, if I don't know how much time I have, but that house was taken up there as a single room, which is the room that the fireplace is in sometime in the early 1900s. And it was added on to piecemeal over time. There were many additions up till the mid-1920s. In summation, I would just say this: that is over a ½ acre of land. The mansion across the street, the Jack's Mansion, was torn down years ago, and that whole block is filled. These people are not proposing to do that. They are proposing a very modest addition. They're doing this in the same vein as my great-grandfather did. The Hellam family would like for this board to facilitate their going ahead with their project as they're attempting to do. You do
Thank you.
not want to
Thank you.
discourage.
Your time is up. Thank you.
Let me just finish one last comment.
Yeah.
You do not want to discourage people that are adding something to this community, because if they sell, you don't know what kind of a Pandora box you'll open. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hellam. Anyone else have something to say?
Morning or good afternoon, Madam Chair. Joel Panzer. I did file a letter that was circulated hopefully today. What we've not heard today is what's driving the program and what's driving that location. The architect mentioned that that's the only spot on the land they had. You heard Mr. Hellam testify. It's over a ½ acre in size. It's a pretty good sized property. My letter basically focused, and I do support staff resolution denying the historic permit HP 24007, the use permit 240081, and denying the adoption of the historic report. My letter basically focuses on the associated landscapes, and you kind of find Monterey's got unique collections of properties that represent, how people lived back in the day. This property's got a tack room, it's got a carriage house, it's got a wash house. So I think it's well preserved, not opposed to development. I think the Page and Turnbull offers a suggestion for an ADU or something that might meet the developers or the owner's needs. But I think it's all, as I see it presented, it overwhelms the spatial relationships. There's no meaningful setbacks. The architectural sheet 4.0, the revision sheet, doesn't even show that building. It just seems like it's being jammed unnecessarily into a space that's in the middle of sort of the historic locus. That's more of an archaeological term. So I think they've got opportunities to rethink the approach, notwithstanding the amount of time they've put in, but I think staff has done a terrific job honoring the H2 zoning, which, as they mentioned, covers the entirety of the property, not just the resource. And with my remaining 1 minute, Clovis's report talks about spatial relationships that characterize the property in Exhibit B, page 8 of her report. The Turnbull report, Exhibit C, page 6, packet page 60 says, project as designed would not comply with standards 2 and 9 due to incompatible design elements and previous and proposed alterations to historic features, plural. Page Exhibit C, packet page 63 talks about character defining features of the property, not just the house, but the property. The tack room, for whatever reason, was excluded as a character defining feature. It shows up on the Sanborn maps in 1925. So under CEQA, that is a historic resource. I'm curious why that wasn't defined in either report. And then it just talks about the page 64 of the packet Exhibit C talks about protecting historic features, and that should be prioritized. So with that, I hope the commission considers the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you too, Joel. Anyone else have a comment to make? Yes, Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Soule and I live in Old Town, and my husband and I have both also done a Mills Act and a historical renovation, which also allowed us to put an addition at the same time in the back of our property. But I do want to say, before I even make my comments, how much I appreciate how well the O'Briens have restored the historic house. It looks beautiful. It's such a great asset to the community, and they've done it with so much care, which is why I was surprised to see the design for the addition. The part that, as was reiterated under Section 9, the part that our historian, Kent Seavey, had us comply with, and our architect was sitting there to get his input, was that it had to be of the same character of the historical house. Our addition in the back's a kitchen. It replaced an old addition that was not historic. But our roof lines match, our dormers match, the eyebrow little eaves match. The style all matches. And I think if you look at that part of it, if you asked the historian, what is the style of the old house? And then what is the style of the addition that you're attaching to the old house, or to that old house? I think it should be, it says here in the requirements under Section 9 that should be compatible. It should have the same kind of features. And the roof line, in my opinion, is the part that I see mostly with it, not so much the smaller details, but the fact that the roof is so distinctly contemporary. As the architect mentioned, it's a contemporary building. The other is a historical building, but the historical building has the pitch. And I'm hoping they might consider a renovate or a different design element there, where the roofs could at least look more compatible to that historic house. because the house itself is so lovely. If it were detached, the addition, yeah, I wouldn't be near as concerned with it. But it's the house itself, not the additional tack rooms and stuff. The house is what's getting, the Mills Act is what you reviewed, was the house. And that's where I think it needs to be of the same compatibility of features, and the roof being most of that. So I want to, again, though, reiterate how well they have done the house. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. It's very good. Anyone else have a comment? Yes, Mr. Seavey.
It's sideways. I'm sorry. Kent Seavey, Historic Preservation Consultant. I was County Historical Coordinator back in the 70s and 80s. I spent a lot of time in the county, and I also grew up on a farm. And the thing that finally came to me after looking at the story polls and thinking about this thing was the relationship of that half acre, probably the biggest property that we can walk around and see. And I've been doing it for 50 years and praying that someone would come along and clean it up, that the city would buy it and make it a small park to sit in the corner with the whole series of historic buildings around it. Now, going back to the standards in this issue, they only used, I believe, and they can correct me, not for architecture, but for Helm, association with an individual. Is that true? There is no C pulled out in this, so the house could have been taken down theoretically. They were working on Helm, and they've tried to do their best to come up with something that would complement. They gave you the house back. That's one of the oldest houses in town. But they wanted to do something that would respect the area and the like, and they've done a wonderful job on that. And it dawned on me on a publication that I helped work on, if you can see it on your screen, sliding it a little bit, that there's a water tank on a windmill that almost takes the form of the addition. And I think based on the verticality and scale, the hyphen is a given in Standard 9. I use them all the time when I have the opportunity to connect, to differentiate, not compare, but differentiate the old from the new. We're differentiating the old from the new. We're not copying the existing, which is a scramble of things. Anyway, think about it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you too, Kent. All right. Go back to my here. Are there any other comments from the floor? Yes, David? Yes, the applicant now. That's okay. Is that all right, Levi?
Sure, it'll be limited to 3 minutes. We're in the public comment
Okay.
I
period.
just wanted to, my name is David McLaughlin, and I just wanted to point out, we've got Meg and John who've done a fantastic job getting us to this point. But as Liam kind of mentioned too, we're contractors. We build high-end custom homes. So with these plans, I guarantee you, just have trust in us. This is going to look amazing. We are going to do the best job on that, and we want to continue our work on the tack room, the washroom, the barn, and the garage. We want to keep all those structures. We believe that this property needs to be kept the way it is. All we're asking for is a space where we can live in those 2 suites. Thank you.
All right. Thank you too, David. Anyone have a comment here?
And can we just go
Levi?
ahead and just remind our how we can participate online if there's
Oh,
and
I'm
if- see
sorry.
if
I
there's any
forgot
public
to
comments.
mention that. Yes, Spencer, is there?
For attendees online, information on participating on this meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is on this meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. Remote commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak, and a timer will be shown on the screen. If you are connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. In the chamber, we recommend keeping phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with the meeting. Thank you for participating in your city government. There are no attendees with their hands raised.
All right, then I would like to close the public comments and open to the commission for any additional comments or move on to a motion.
I'd like to make some
Yes,
comments.
please, William.
It seems like there's a bit of a conflict in the standards between trying to blend in with the existing structure and differentiate from the existing structure. And I can understand how there would be different situations where you'd want to blend your extension in with the existing architecture and cases where you'd want it to be able to differentiate. And I think in this case, you're looking to differentiate what you're adding on to the existing structure. Because otherwise, somebody coming by looking at it would not really appreciate or understand the significance of the house. And part of the significance of that house is that it was a tiny little house. And the addition that they've designed makes that distinction quite nicely, I think.
Mhm. Okay, Linda,
So I have,
something to add?
yeah, I have a few things. I think what we need to determine as a commission is if we are going to accept the report, the original report, or not approve that. And then if we don't approve that, then we would make a determination on the project. Is that correct?
Essentially, yes. This commission basically needs to make the determination of whether or not the project's consistent with the SOI standards, which the applicant prepared report states that it is. If this commission does not find that it meets the Secretary of Interior standards, then you'd be moving to deny.
Okay, so my comments are, I appreciate all the hard work that you've done with the house. Look from the outside, it looks wonderful. However, I don't think that the project is consistent, especially with standard number 9, in that the blocky massing, the fenestrations, and the flat roof are not compatible with the historic building. And I know that the standard does say that you can use contemporary or modern or other things, but to me, that visually, that blockiness, I have a problem with that. I don't think it's compatible. I think there's some alternatives that you could consider. And I'm not an architect, so I think you can look at some other options, but I don't think it's compatible with at least the standard number 9. The other thing I wanted to bring up is there was a discussion in PNT's report about archaeological findings, and that was not brought up today. So if it is approved, I think we need to put a condition that if any archaeological resources are found, that the project stops and that the necessary procedures that are approved by the city are followed. So I just wanted to bring that up as well.
I'd like to add something, but Carol, you go ahead first.
Well, I want to thank the staff for bringing in another a peer review, because one of our challenges has been dealing with the applicant's qualified historic architect, and then we have nothing else out there. So now we have the big city people coming in. My experience, I think the city's experience with these larger firms is that they're not always God. The path of history, I think, which we just recently did, had a lot of flaws.
Correct.
So they're not the oracle. Having said that, and reading this over and over and over again, it's also squishy. It's just compatible, and So the eye, it's in the eye of the beholder.
Mhm.
When I first walked in and saw the massing and whatnot, it's like, oh my God. But then I looked, and this is not part of the project, but I looked around and there were all these apartment buildings. So
That's
it
true.
wasn't, when I went home, I went up on Sino Street and there were all these little houses. So that this is not on Sino Street.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's part of it, if we can consider that at all. The back door doesn't bother me. That was part of
Yeah.
Page and Turnbull's thing. The, what kind of bothers me is the atrium, but not enough to not approve it, I think. And can we see the slide where it's, the addition is in white?
Yeah, I know. I like the
Um,
white.
Because from what I understand of the last meeting, they took Kent Seavey's suggestion of having it blend into the back.
Mhm.
And so I'm of two minds. I think the brown has it black blend into the background, but the white maybe looks more compatible with the original structure.
I think so too.
I try to think, what are the people in 50 years going to think about this? How will they will this just be another addition to the Helm House, which started out as, I don't know, it looks like a barracks building. So anyway, and looking at the fenestration, on the, I guess that's the east side, those windows seem to be the same size and shape as the ones on the original house, I think, though there's a lot of glass in that atrium.
Right.
So that was my feeling. This is, I rarely lose sleep over HPC things, but this had me churning at 4 o'clock in the morning with what's compatible, what isn't compatible.
I agree. Thank you, Carol. Just to kind of summarize what you have said, and some of the public too, going over this so many times, which I have since last month, one line, preservation brief 14 keeps jumping out at me. A new addition should always be subordinate to the historic building. It should not compete in size, scale, or design with the historic building. And that's what I keep seeing in all of this. Anyone else?
You're saying that it is,
Yes, it's competing with
Okay.
the historic building. Maybe subordinate's not the correct word, but it's competing. It's not
But they
compatible.
don't,
I
Page
agree
and
with that.
Turnbull don't seem to be quibbling about the size. Which kind of.
Yeah, which is,
they do
yeah,
talk about the mass, they do talk about the mass in their report.
Mhm.
well, and they recommend an ADU even
Right.
too.
Mhm.
So that could be a different size and so forth also.
Mhm.
Could be larger than this, actually. So,
Yeah, it seems their objections were with the architectural style. not the mass.
They said
well, and that seems to be what's going on here too, I think.
flat roof, blocky massing, and the glazing were their issues.
But the Secretary of Interior standards allow for really different styles.
As long as
And
they're
that's what's so
compatible.
That's what's so confusing
Mhm.
is,
Mhm.
and that's where it maybe with the different paint, the white paint, it would be a little more compatible. But we don't, I mean, the different roof line, which roof line do you pick to mimic?
And that's all
And then you're
design
even more
or
your
scale.
larger, yeah, it is a conundrum.
Mhm.
Well,
So-
people walking down the sidewalk and looking at this house are going to see with the design as it is with the darker color, it's going to look like the house that lives behind it, not like part of the historic place that they're looking at. So as far as maintaining.
Unless you're on the street below it, and it's obviously it's part of the house.
True.
Mhm. Geraldine, did you have something to add, please?
I was glad that Carol asked to see that, the slide with the white, smaller board
Mhm.
decoration. And, I look at this one and I look at the white one, and the white one sort of fits in better visually. Although it's definitely a more modern addition, it doesn't look like it's historical. I think it sets, the difference is very easy to see. I don't find it, in fact, I almost think it's more visually attractive somehow with the house in front to have the back look like that. It still sets it apart. I wondered if the applicants considered it a separate structure completely set away from the house. That was one of the recommendations, and I didn't hear them respond to that. If that was of any interest to them or what their reasons were for not wanting to do that. It's fine with me if they respond.
I can open up the public comment, yes.
Well, first off, we did submit a darker structure to planning. It's just not on the presentation. So that's just what it looks like in the.
We have
We got a copy of
it.
that, yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
This question came up the last time, and our response was that this is a home. It's not a compound. So we have two families that want to stay together in the same home with connection, and we don't want to have to go down the end of the garden to, go to bed. So it's a home. It's not a compound, and that's kind of our feeling about it.
I wasn't here last.
Yeah,
time,
that's
so I didn't
okay.
hear it.
And then, everybody's talking about it being wedged in between, the wash house and the tack room. That's specifically because we want to keep those two structures. We could have easily taken the two structures down and gone out further, but we wanted to save the integrity of the property. And I think that's the biggest factor here. So it's either we still want to keep the connection with the hyphen. If we go to a 1-story, we're going to be forced into taking those two structures down. So we're here going against the preservation committee, trying to preserve two structures. So it just seems quite bizarre. That's it.
There are options, though. I was on another committee and we looked at a house where they're actually digging down to add that second floor. So the top floor was lower. So it was almost like a walkout basement. So, I mean, there are options. I mean, I'm not an.
We've gone through this whole process with planning, building
Okay.
from a year and a half ago. And this has been guided by them as
Okay.
well as us. We've gone through every single process. We've kind of went through all the Secretary of Interior standards. We've done everything in our power to do the right thing. And it's just surprising why everybody seems to be so opposed to this when I think it's a step back so far from Van Buren, not very visible from Scott, and certainly not visible from Larkin. And we're willing to do screening, anything, but I think we're locked in. So, any more questions?
Yes, Geraldine. Thank you, Liam.
So I guess my concern is, are you completely sure that you want the brown instead of the white?
That is completely up to the committee.
Pardon?
We're happy to go either way. White is fine, brown is fine, pink is fine, whatever you guys want.
You don't have a preference,
No,
really?
I don't actually. I think both look really good. I actually just think the structure itself looks really good. And I like the separation and the definition between the old and the new. I think it really stands out. And I think everybody in the neighborhood would be very pleased with it when we're done. Like Dave said, we're in the custom home industry, and that's what we do. And I guarantee you, we're not just trying to build a box.
I was just going to say that too. All right. Julie, did you have a comment? We haven't heard from you for a while.
Can we first close the public hearing if there's no further public comment?
I'm sorry about that. Yes, we'll close the public hearing unless someone else there. All right.
We should limit it to.
And there are no attendees with their hands raised.
And no, thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Julie, did you?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wanted to thank the applicant, the design team, their historian for having us out on Monday, kind of walking through, having very clear story polls, delineation, answering questions. So I thought that was very helpful for this commission and for other folks who came and attended that. And some of my questions about the inconsistencies in the report were answered today by the project architect. I think my preference would still be to have the consensus between the two studies that, you know, we're obligated to approve a historic plan that is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. And I think through the peer review process, there would have been an option to resolve some of these additional issues. I don't think Page and Turnbull has even seen or responded to some of the concessions that have been offered by the applicant. And so I wondered if any of their conclusions would have been changed through seeing some of these concessions. You know, with that said, I'm kind of equally as torn a bit on this one, but after going out to the site, it appears to not be so voluminous in kind of scale than what it appeared in plans. So that was kind of reassuring. I'm not concerned about the setback. I think that is appropriate, and frankly, I'm disappointed that there's not the same process to allow for heights or different kind of volumes for historic structures, because I think we're wrestling a bit on the style of the flat roof. And a lot of us think that it's not really compatible with the existing building and would prefer a similar gable roof maybe on the addition, but the code prohibits that height. So the applicant can't really do that for a 2-story. They'd have to go down to 1 story. And that, you know, according to the applicant, doesn't fit into their program. So those are kind of my initial thoughts here. I've obviously been listening to everybody here and taking everything in.
Thank you, Julie. Well, what would you like to do?
Just one observation. I frequently drive through Oak Grove outside the postgraduate school, and they have a lot of little cottages that have been added on to, and some ADUs. A lot of them are large. They're all in the back. Most of them are lower than the highest roof line. Some of the ADUs are actually kind of interesting. They all reflect the paint on the original property. But there's everything from a block addition put right on the back of a house. So it just kind of goes back and back and back to little things that almost look like motels. Maybe they are in the back, to an ADU that is looks like some sort of galvanized steel in the same color as the older house that on whose property it sits. So these additions are all over the map, but some of them are quite large, larger than the original house. And this is, I didn't get, Levi, maybe you can, so the addition is the 1,300 square feet, not the 1,000. Is that correct?
At this, the plans that were submitted to us for review show the addition as 1,317
Right.
square feet. There was a statement from the applicant today that there was a miscalculation. We have not had plans that have been submitted that
Yeah.
staff has been able to review or verify that
He said they were correct on the plans, but I wasn't sure which, not that it meant
Yeah.
that much. Thank you.
Yeah, 13. So you're welcome. Thank you. Well, what would be the next step here? A motion?
So a motion would be the next step. If it seems like it's hard to get a read on whether or not there's a consensus, but if the commission is inclined to find the project consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards, I can help you all with a motion and what that would look like.
All right, that would be helpful.
Okay.
I've got a question. So we've got the project, the number 2 and number 9 that we have to reconcile. Number 2 seems to be about the report. And it seemed that they didn't find the report was adequate. Can the report be upgraded, updated differently from all the other Secretary of Interior standard stuff?
Are you suggesting revising the historic preservation report and not adopting the report?
I don't know. Is that
So you can't, so as the code noted earlier, there is a requirement before you can issue a historic permit that it has to have an adopted historic preservation report, that you all are checking the box that it's consistent with that historic preservation report. So it has to have to be approving both. I don't know if that answers your question.
so? If we approve one, we're approving both. We can't
Correct.
approve.
You're
the
essentially
project
saying-
asking for a better.
Yes,
preservation
adopting the report is saying that you find the report sufficient and that it evaluates the proposed project and is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. And then that's what is allowing you to then approve the historic permit consistent with the report that was prepared.
Okay. Can I make a motion?
Yes, this is exactly what Levi was just saying, I believe. That might help too.
Yeah, I have this. I
Okay,
move to deny the adoption of the historic preservation report as written. And therefore denying the historic permits. Is that good enough?
yeah, the use permit.
Use permit.
And yeah, you would be not forwarding a recommendation for the use permit to the Planning Commission to approve the use permit
Okay, what you said.
as adequate. Yeah. You can also just say the staff recommendation. We can just package it that way as well. So it covers
Yes.
everything.
Oh, the staff recommendation.
Yeah.
So I move to approve the staff recommendation of denying the permits.
Perfect. We have a
Yes.
motion.
Is there a second on that?
I have a question, but do we need a second before we have it?
I don't know. We're in the middle of a vote, aren't we?
Usually we have a second and then a discussion.
Chair, Commissioner Rath can, for the moment, withdraw her motion, and then we can go back to questioning, and then we can come back to that motion if we,
All right,
Okay,
Let's
I withdraw
do
my motion.
okay.
all right, Carol.
So if we deny the preservation report, can they come back with a better written report? And we've made no recommendations particularly, except maybe on color, for how to make this work or compliant.
Well,
Yeah.
different design.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Remember
think the
mentioned
commission would
scale.
need to be very specific with any direction. And I think it's been brought up at this meeting, whether or not the applicant's willing to make further revisions to the design. It seems they've been pretty clear that the proposed design is what they want to move forward with and what they want this commission to make a decision on.
Thank you.
All right. Do you want to restate that then, Linda?
My motion?
Yes.
Yes, I move to deny the adoption of the historic preservation report as written, and therefore denying or following the staff
Accepting it.
recommendations to deny the historic permits.
We have a motion.
All right. Is there a second for that motion? No second.
Okay, that's fine. I tried.
All right. So if there is no second,
The motion will fail for lack of a second.
okay. So we're back to square one, basically.
Well, it
We
sounds
can
like if
make
that
another
motion,
motion.
if that motion failed for lack of a second, then it seems like there may be some consensus upon the commission to approve the project.
Maybe adding something like you were saying, Carol, to come, I mean, we, as you said, we
Well-
discussed color, but come back with something different on design or
I-
scale or.
I don't, it would not be what I would design, but I'm not the owner of the property, so this is not, it. I would accept it. I would recommend the white color, but I'm not wedded to that.
Right.
We do need to put in there the archaeology. And the paperwork seems that needs to be pumped up, but apparently that's not something we can, the actual report is not something we can,
Well, if the commission has issues with the historic preservation report provided that supports the project, then that's the document that's finding the project
Right.
consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So if you disagree with the report,
Yeah.
you're essentially finding the project inconsistent with the
Right.
Secretary of.
well, some of
Superior
the,
standards.
some of the quibbles that Page and Turnbull had were like footnoting, which didn't seem to be, that was academic.
But it was the inconsistency with number 2 and number 9.
Well, number 2 talks about the report and the lack of
No,
footnotes.
the
and-
standard number 2 and standard
Yeah,
number 9.
Yeah, number 2 was talking about how it was documented, I think.
We're talking about 2 different 2s.
Oh.
Can we make a motion then to, geez, I don't know, elaborate on 2 and 9 or what?
No, I'll make a motion that we uh, reject this.
I can help. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I can help. Yeah. So if you'll bear with me here.
That's why you get the big bucks.
Okay, so before we get to a motion, so essentially we would have to make findings that this project does meet the Secretary of Interior standards, so that conflicting standards 2 and 9. So if this commission would have to make a finding that it's consistent with all the Secretary of Interior standards. So what I would do is I would highlight the changes in the draft resolution that was included in the packet and have those noted in the record. So starting with Secretary of Interior Standard number 2 as shown here. So this would be a draft finding in support of the project, finding that Secretary of Interior Standard number 2 is met. And that a historic evaluation was provided by a qualified historian, proposed alterations, and the commission finds that the project would not negatively affect the historic character of the property, making the project consistent with SOI standard number 2. The other finding that would need to be made deals with SOI standard number 9. So this commission would be finding that Secretary of Interior standard number 9 is met and that a historical evaluation was provided, and finds that the proposed addition and project would not negatively affect historic materials that characterize the property, making this project consistent with Secretary of Interior standard number 9. So those would be the 2 findings that are differentiated from this draft resolution that was included in your packet.
Okay, so.
And then these are draft conditions of approval that could also be incorporated into the resolution as well. So starting, they're primarily our standard conditions of approval that are typically applied to projects of this nature, with the addition, obviously, of that special condition of approval number 1, requiring that the use permit be approved by the Planning Commission prior to issuance of building permits. And then I agree that I think the archaeological condition as noted in the Page and Turnbull report should also be included, incorporated into any motion that's made. And I can also help you with the wording of a motion if you'd like, and then you can just take it from there.
Okay. So I move that we find that this meets the conditions of the Secretary of Interior standards, including 2 and 9. And we want to include the draft conditions with the addition of the archaeology, if they find anything archaeologically interesting. Yeah.
We should really finish the motion
Yeah,
before we go into
and
questions.
is that it? Do I have anything else
Uh,
that I need
I-
to include?
I think you're almost there. You'll need to note that you're moving that you approve the historic permit, approving you're adopting the historic preservation report, and to forward a recommendation of approval to the planning commission for the setback incentive. And
Do I
that the
have to repeat
project is,
all that?
no, you don't. I'm just
Thank you.
I'm reading it into the record, so we don't. And that the project is found to be exempt from CEQA under sections 15303 and 15331 and does not qualify for any of the exceptions found under section 15300.2.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Yes, Geraldine, you wanted to?
Yes,
add
prior
something?
to the second, I want to say I came in with many concerns and appreciate your explanation of the process and also your timeline of the back and forth. And we realize this is the first time you've had to work with these. It may be a little confusing. You didn't know the history of how we do Mills Act and previously. So I don't think that's necessarily the fault of anyone. It could just be the confusing. The thing about the color, I heard that was an addition, that there were concerns last time with the color. So you came up with another choice, but I would like you to reconsider the white, but you're the owner. You know, I don't want you to think you have to come up with the dark just based on Kent trying to make it work out for you, because I think he was trying to make it work out for you so I actually had a lot of concerns coming in with it. I also appreciated Mr. Hellam coming and giving his perspective that it's not easy. He waited a long time to find the right buyers.
Yes.
And that touched me somehow, that he felt you were the right buyers. And I think that's important. And so I second the motion, Carol.
Prior to taking a vote, can we just specify, did your motion includes the project as proposed with the white color?
Yes.
Okay. And your
Sure.
second still stands?
That was the applicant's first choice.
Yeah, that's how it's been proposed and that's how staff's, we just need to be very clear that that's not a sticking point. So white, okay, thank you.
Okay. So we announced the motion made by Carol O'Neill and seconded by Geraldine Smith-Crivello. So I think we should move on for a vote here.
A roll call. Chair Column,
Yes?
Vice Chair Rath,
No.
Commissioner Barlow,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Pizell,
Yes.
and Commissioner Smith-Crivello.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Amen. Thank you to the applicants, historians, staff, and my fellow colleagues here.
This motion is appealable to the planning commission.
Oh, I have to say that too. I
Within
don't
10 days
see
of
that.
today's date on forms available at the planning office and online.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. Good luck. I think we should move on to the second public hearing, even though I have public appearance on my instructions, but I will say public hearing. Okay, Fernanda. And that, of course, is our rotation here, chair, vice chair, et cetera. Did everybody read the suggestions from the staff?
So we were busy with
If I
it.
can find where I put mine, I know I have them here. Jeez, where are they now? I guess, well, here. they
Yeah,
must
I,
be.
I don't really have a staff presentation prepared. I try to keep the report brief. If you have any questions about
Yeah.
attendance record, I do have the Vice Chair Rath's and Commissioner Rodriguez's attendance for July 2023 till now.
Okay. Linda, you just got back from Africa. Did you get to read about the rotation? I keep saying rotation, but the changing of the guard basically here. You are currently the vice chair, and it has been recommended that you become the chair. And you and Juan start exactly the same time. I think it was January 19, 3.5 years ago. And he would be the nominee for the vice chair. I personally have no problem.
We need to take public comment first.
Oh, on this
Yes.
too? Oh, okay. All right. Spencer, could you help with the public comment?
Yes, there are no attendees online.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Geraldine, what are your comments?
I'm
on this?
interested to hear the attendance records.
All right.
Okay, so
Can't find that last. page.
Commissioner Rodriguez had absences on July 2023, April 2024, and today. And Vice Chair Rath had June 2024 absence.
And that was it
Mhm.
for, okay, that's great. Good work, Linda. All right, anyone else have a comment, question? Yes, go ahead,
I'm
Geraldine.
sorry that Mr. Rodriguez isn't here today, because it would be nice to, I think I've met him one time. I missed him last
Yeah, he was
meeting.
here
I
last
was
month.
absent.
Right.
And it does seem that since he is working full time and has a busy job, it's
Yeah, I
hard for him
found
to be here. I know that that's difficult.
Oh,
And so
yeah, sure.
I wonder, does he want to move ahead to be the vice chair? Have
Yeah,
you heard
that's-
from him?
Oh, we don't know. I didn't ask him.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah.
curious what his interest is in it. If it's a lot for him to do, or if he is really interested in doing this. with-
He didn't, did he tell you he was going to be absent today,
Yes.
Fernanda? And did he make any comment about what we were discussing today in terms of
No.
that change?
No, he did not.
He didn't. So we can go ahead and vote on this, and then you would be contacting him, I guess, to find out if that's what he
Uh,
wants or what? If that's what we decide.
Well, you can appoint him to be vice chair. I guess at the next meeting, he can deny it, but then we would have to agendize this again to appoint another vice chair.
I think we
Right.
were doing that.
Yeah, yeah, I was just looking at your, what you recommend, the staff. And I just sort of assume we should be voting on this. Do the others agree? Do all of you agree with me on that?
Usually vote on it or?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes,
Okay, then I
yeah.
make a motion that that we move ahead with the recommendation that you're willing to take on the responsibility of being chair. You've done this kind of thing before, I know. So I recommend that you do so, and that we ask if Mr. Rodriguez wants to accept the position of vice chair, and inform him he's in that rotation. And we've noticed that sometimes he's not able to be here, and ask if he feels he can handle that responsibility. And then if he can't, we'll have to bring it back to the next meeting.
Yeah, I don't think we should assume that he wants to do one or the other. I
Yeah,
think
we need to
should vote
ask
him
him.
in and. yeah.
Right, that's
Move
what I
ahead.
was gonna say.
And I'll
and-
note, we can reach out after the meeting prior to the agenda being prepared for the next meeting. And if for whatever reason he does not wish to accept it, we can go ahead and agendize it on the next meeting.
Okay,
And then we can do this again
Okay,
if we need to.
great.
all right. I'd like to second it, the motion.
a second.
All right, okay, I cannot second this, what Geraldine just.
I'll second.
Okay, Carol O'Neill has seconded.
Yeah.
All right,
All in favor?
and then can we just do a general, all in favor?
Still have to do a roll call because we have a
Yeah, okay,
virtual
we're doing the roll
commissioner.
call.
And Chair Column,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rath,
Aye.
Commissioner Barlow,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Aye.
Commissioner Pizell,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith Carvello.
Aye.
That motion passes.
Good, motion carries, very good.
Available.
Okay, let's see, any other comments from the commission?
I'm just,
Or-
it didn't make the upcoming historical events because we just confirmed that at the Lighthouse, we're having our open house, living history, $25, you get a ride to the top on August 4th. There will be people in costume.
Okay.
Linda might be one of them.
And for those at home, can you specify where that's at?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Point
Point
Sur,
Sur.
State Historic Park in Big Sur.
Yeah, yes, well, there was something mentioned about
Yeah.
Point Sur in our,
It's the
announcements
Moonlight
here.
Tours.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very popular, sells out very quickly, I
I
know.
would encourage people to go
Yeah.
to maybe the September one because the last one in June was fog on fog on fog. No sunset, no moonrise, a lot of fog.
But I'm giving the one this month.
Oh,
So-
are you? Well, they go on Linda. She gives a good tour.
So the open house is August 4th?
August 4th, I think at
Okay.
12. We haven't,
Okay.
we just got transportation today. It's very late.
Right. Oh, wow, that's
Yeah.
great. I know, I've been up there a couple of times. I love it. All right.
When you say
um,
you just have transportation, what does that mean?
Well, to get a ride to the top, state parks had to find
That's
vans
right.
and that's not easy.
No.
You'd think it would be easy, but it's not. So we
To
got
get a
vans.
ride to the,
You get a ride to the top.
oh, you do
Yeah.
for the evening one.
No. This is for our open house on August 4th. For the Moonlight Tour, you're walking in the fog. I mean, you're walking in the fresh air.
Okay,
Fresh
okay.
air. That's
So
good.
we're talking
Yeah.
about the later one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alright. Yes. Okay, any more? Julie, did you have anything to announce?
No,
Okay.
thanks, guys.
Any informal staff reports?
Just that the tentative agenda for the next meeting on August 8th is to bring a Millsack inspections report to you. So
Yes.
Matthew is busy preparing a report of compliance with all of our 60+ Millsack properties.
Okay, great.
Is
Great.
Archer,
good.
the Archer Street, do you know, does that have a Mills Act contract on it? The Archer Mansion, Archer, it's on Archer Street.
Oh, wait, I have. my
I'm not
folder
sure, but
here
I
Yeah.
can
With,
get
I'll
back to you
check
on that.
when he brings the report. Oh,
you can run
Don't-
through these
don't
if you
take-
want.
no, I can go online.
Yeah, you're clear to quiz Matthew as much as you want whenever
thank
he's
you.
here.
Oh, there you go.
He appreciates that.
There you
Yeah.
go.
And I'd like to thank outgoing Chair Column for her service. And
Thank you.
did a great job.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
my 4 meetings, thank you very
Yeah, but they've been so easy.
But they were
especially this one.
contentious.
At least these
Yeah.
2 were
They were challenging.
consecutive.
Yeah.
Yes,
They had their
yes.
challenges.
Some of my colleagues have mentioned that, especially being gone last month too.
Can I
And,
get some background on our new commissioner?
oh, of course, that's a great idea. Thank you, Linda, for suggesting that. So William, please tell us about you.
So I'm an engineer by degree and by most of my occupation. Quit engineering work when I was 50. So I've sort of done a couple retirement gigs in the meantime. I turned 65 in May and I'm slowly retiring, but rapidly. Next month, I'm going to just start working part-time and at least by the end of the year, be completely retired. I've been in Monterey for the last 8 years. We moved down here from San Jose. We were there for 20 years. Before that, we lived in Alameda. We lived in a historic house.
Yeah.
And I have always had a love of architecture and history. So I'm excited to be on this
What,
committee.
what kind of engineer are you?
I was an electrical engineer. First 13 years I did industrial design and construction. Then I went into high purity gas system installations. Then I went into abatement equipment design for semiconductor manufacturing tools. And my last engineering employment was managing new product development for one of Applied Materials business lines. Applied Materials is the largest semiconductor equipment manufacturer in the world. So
Welcome.
Yes, very interesting, William. In fact, that's something I did want to add. In just those 4 meetings in the past year, I've been able to welcome 2 new commissioners. So Julie and William, and that was a pleasure. And then, of course, Levi too. I'm sorry, Levi, and Spencer. Gee, we've had a lot of new faces. That's great.
Yeah.
With some of us old ones. All right, I think I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Yeah.
Everybody in favor?
I want to just say